Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Shannon from Good Fruit, and we are back for another week to talk about, you guessed it, just kidding. I don't think you guessed it, because I didn't even guess it. I sat down with Jesus and was like, okay, we're going to do this thing that you asked, but I'm going to need you to help me here, because I don't know what we're going to talk about. And mostly because, lately it's been just me hanging out with Jesus. And most vlogs are about people doing things and going places. And to be honest with you, I ain't going a lot of places, but I am spending a lot of time with Jesus. We sat down and we started discussing everything from the beginning. And you might ask, why are we back at the beginning? Yeah, we started at the beginning last week, but why are we back at the beginning of creation? It's about living in this world and how hard it is to live in this world. Even having him, being in full communication with him, being in his presence on a daily basis, it is still so hard to exist in this place. And I, all the time, and I'm sure I'm not the only one when I say this, am constantly searching and looking for him in a space where he's like, there's just not a lot of me. If you look around on a daily basis, the biggest thing and the reason why I'm feeling the way that I feel is there is a lack of his presence. Although Holy Spirit is consistently around all of us and searching the earth on a daily basis for those that are seeking for him in spirit and truth, there is a lack of presence of God's greatness and God's goodness in this place. And so when me and him were discussing that, he's like, you're continuing to look to the world on a daily basis for me, and what you're sad about on a daily basis is that you find that I am not in any of these things. I'm not in most of the things that you enjoy and do. I'm not in most of the places that you like to go and hang out at. And for me, I continue every day to feel like trapped in my home. I feel like I'm not the only person that feels this way. And then when I go out, I feel very alone, even if I have a lot of people around me, because where I am mentally and spiritually versus physically are just two different places, like two different cosmic existences. We are more real in spirit and truth than we are in flesh and blood. And if you are born again through the Spirit, you are born again through Jesus, where you live in your existence is more in the Spirit and more in truth than it is here in this physical presence. I am here, I'm living in this existence, and there is a pull that exists and consistently happens on me, and I feel it physically and I feel it spiritually. We sat down and he wanted to go back to the beginning, back to the creation, back to where he created Adam and Eve. What was given? What was given to us? And how are we made? I just described it a little bit ago about how I exist and where I exist currently, which is in spirit and truth. When we were made, when God made Adam and Eve, Jesus and the Father were like, let's make them in our image, our image. So what does that really mean? Well, we know where the Father is and we know where Jesus is. It's in spirit and in truth, and they're sitting up on the throne next to each other discussing even this conversation right now. What's up, guys? They are in spirit and they are in truth. They are not of flesh and blood. They are eternal. The garden was a place where Adam and Eve lived in spirit and in truth. Now, what does that mean? In spirit and in truth. They were made in God's image. They were of the Spirit and they lived in truth. To live in truth means to live within the presence of God. They were not in the garden of themselves, right? They were walking around with Jesus and the Father. They were in the presence. They were within communication. They were so close that every day they were going and knocking on the door of God and asking for a cup of sugar. And you know why? Because God, when he created them, and he created all of everything, he gave Adam and Eve dominion and stewardship over his creation. He told them to watch, to be fruitful and multiply, to tend to the earth and tend to the flock. Not only were Adam and Eve living in spirit and truth, they were living out the instruction of what the Father and what Jesus gave them. And even in that instruction, they were also given everything. Everything was theirs. This is the world that God intended for us to live in. Relationship with Him. And out of that relationship, He gave us all of Him. He gave us all His love, all of His creation, sharing within the existence of Him. This is the world, not the one we live in, not the one that I can feel and touch and smell and run around in and toil, let's be real, toil, but the one that's in spirit and in truth, the one that we lived in inside of the garden. If Adam and Eve stayed where they were. Now, what does that mean? That means they stepped out of that relationship of spirit and in truth. And this is where we get the world that we currently live in. There was a fall. I'm sure we all know the story of Adam and Eve and the apple. What really happened when they decided to bite and eat the apple? The offer that was presented to them, the offer of understanding of what death was that was presented to them, was that you surely will not die, but you will be like God. You will have all the knowledge of good and evil and be like God. If we were intended to live in spirit and truth, in that moment, Adam and Eve made a decision to sideline God, to think, what could world be like without God? And in that moment, decided not to ask Him, cutting God out of the equation, going by their own discernment, their own knowledge, their own decisions, and bit of the apple. Now, it's very clear from the existence that we live in what happened in that, because what I've been saying since earlier is that now we live in a place where God no longer exists with us, and now we have all the knowledge and all the lies, only our own accord to decipher them. These are the major two differences between the world that God intended us to live in versus the world that we currently live in. And really understanding the true differences between them. One where you live with God, with His guidance and His love and His understanding, where He helps you through everything. Or there's the other one where you go by your own understanding and you try to figure out the difference between right and wrong, and you have all the answers in the world, and then you seem to still have the snake that's in the garden that's giving you half a truth. We live in a world full of lies and full of deception, where every single thing that has been offered to us is actually offered to us in fraud. It's offered to us with no true truth to this existence. And if you look at the world around us, like, it's really evident that a world like this is awful and it's not fun to exist in. I don't know anybody that's happy that exists in this place. And even myself, who has all the love of God, all the presence of God, all the proximity to God, I am still unhappy living in this place. So now that we're here in the fall, living within the fall, where do we go from here? And this is a good place to stop. Next week, I want to go into Jesus, because that's where we go from here. Once we understand truly where we exist, which is inside of the fall, and that there is no other way back to spirit and truth other than through the salvation of Jesus, through the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the only place where to go from here, to be honest. I hope that kind of explains to everybody where we're going. Is it's really important to grasp the understanding of where we exist, where God intended it for us to exist versus what we exist in. Truly, He wants everybody to know and understand that we were never meant to be here. And that's why next week we're going to discuss Jesus and why He sent Jesus in the flesh and blood here for us to understand the difference between the world He intended for us to live in versus the world that we are currently left in. So until next time, make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel. Spread love and continue to be good fruit.